Okay, today we're looking at types of phrase and clause. So when you study this, you'll see that there's a lot of variety out there. There are a lot of different types of phrase and clause that you can use in your writing and in your speaking. And so let's have a look at it. There is a hierarchy that I want you to understand when you're looking at phrases and clauses. And at the top of the hierarchy is the main clause. And it's at the top because it can stand on its own. It doesn't need anything else to make sense. You can put a full stop at the end of a main clause. That's how you know you've got a main clause. If you can put a full stop at the end of it, that means it's a main clause. Another way of understanding a main clause is that it's a complete thought. In other words, you can go up to somebody and say a main clause and it makes sense. If you just say a subordinate clause or a phrase, it isn't enough information for the person to think that you've said something, something that holds meaning. You need at least one main clause in there, and that's why main clause is right at the top of the hierarchy. Next is subordinate clause, and after subordinate clause you get phrase. Now be careful here, because I will show you in a second that even though phrase is below subordinate clause, you still get noun phrases with subordinate clauses, especially relative clauses. You still get noun phrases that have relative clauses inside them. And it's still a noun phrase because the noun is the head word, but the relative clause describes the noun, and that means that the relative clause is inside the phrase. So you do get some subordinate clauses that are still further down the hierarchy, even though generally speaking we put them above a phrase. Okay, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. I'll go into it in more detail, but a main clause is a finite clause, which means it must contain a subject and a verb, which is something we decided was called a finite verb. Yeah, a finite verb is a verb with a doer, a verb with a subject. And so a main clause always has a subject and a verb, at least. Yeah, quite often it has a subject and a verb and an object. But the main clause is right up the top, and we can combine main clauses, because quite often you get just a main clause, but you might get a main clause and a subordinate clause. That's called a complex sentence. But you might get two main clauses, and that's called a compound sentence. And this is how you combine two main clauses. There are only a few different ways you can, which is you can combine it by putting a comma and a fanboys conjunction, also known as a coordinating conjunction. Yeah, they coordinate main clauses. These are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. And so you very often see in literature main clause, comma, fanboys word, main clause. And that's good. That's a good way of punctuating your sentences. But you might not see a fanboys word there, in which case there'll be a semicolon or a full stop. A full stop is fine here as well. Yeah, I want to make that clear. It's main clause, full stop, main clause. Or if you want to show the two main clauses are quite linked, are connected to each other, then you use a semicolon. And it's a good thing to do because it shows the examiner that you know how to use a semicolon. You'll also get this one, and I've forgotten to put the comma in here. You get main clause, conjunctive adverb,